I now welcome representatives from the Department of Defence. Thank you for appearing before the committee today. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you and is available from the Secretariat. I remind senators and witnesses that the Senate has resolved that an officer of the Department of a Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanation of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. You are advised that it is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to the committee. For the Hansard record, could I please get you both to state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Thank you, Senator. My name is Air Vice Marshal Tim Innes. I'm representing the Defence Aviation Authority.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Major General Dave Hafner. I'm the Commander of Army's Aviation Command.
Thank you. And did you have an opening statement that you'd like to say before? Excellent. Please proceed.
Thanks for the opportunity to appear before the committee again today. Before commencing, I'd like to acknowledge that last Tuesday marked the third anniversary of the tragic MH90 Taipan helicopter accident that occurred during exercise Talisman Sabre on the 28th of July 2023. 3 years on, we continue to remember Captain Daniel Lyon, Lieutenant Maxwell Nugent, Warrant Officer Class 2 Joseph Philip Laycock and Corporal Alexander Naggs. Their loss continues to be felt deeply by the families, friends, teammates, units and the broader Army and Defence community. We pay our respects and acknowledge the enduring impact of this tragedy on their families and all those affected. Defence welcomes the opportunity to again assist the committee in the examination of this matter. In support of the committee's work, Defence has provided responses to the questions on notice from the last hearing, noting the technical nature of some of the questions, that artefacts and actions extend over the past decade and that several of the members involved have now transitioned from full-time service. It has been important to take the time to ensure the completeness of these responses. We thank the committee for your patience in this regard. Defence has accepted all 46 recommendations arising from the Defence Flight Safety Bureau Aviation Safety Investigation Report and continues to prioritise implementation through a robust governance and assurance framework with independent oversight. We value the important role that investigations and inquiries play in learning from tragedies such as this. We also acknowledge the impacts that these ongoing investigations are having on all individuals involved. Defence's focus remains on caring for our people, learning from this tragedy and ensuring that the lessons identified are translated into enduring improvements in aviation safety. We thank the committee for the opportunity to appear again today and will do our best to assist with your questions.
Thank you very much for that. And I will just make mention of the questions that were put on notice to you, and extensions were granted by the committee for that. Yet we received them after close of business on Friday, with the hearing commencing this morning. That does make it very difficult for senators on this committee to be able to consider those responses in the fullness of time that they deserve. And as you've mentioned, some of them were quite technical in nature. It does hamper our ability to be able to do our job. And I guess I would just like it noted that we don't ask for those things because we're just trying to be difficult. It is so that we can pull together questions, and there may be some further questions that come from that just because the committee hasn't been able to, and members of the committee haven't been able to actually look at those responses and have been given a reasonable time frame to be able to consider the responses that have been received. We will now move into questions and I will give the call to Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing again today. And thank you for your service. Going to your comments about noting the technical nature of some of the questions in your comments in your written statement that you read out, that artefacts and actions extend over the past decade. It's fair to say that Taipan has been beset with problems since when did it first come into service?
Sandra, around 2007 is when you see the aircraft commencing into service.
Thank you. The purchase decision was made when? 2003?
I'd need to check that exactly,
okay.
Sandra.
That's okay. It's been a bit of an embarrassment, hasn't it?
Sandra, I wouldn't use those words. What I would say is, the MRH-90 Taipan has been, in service with the Australian Defence Force up until its withdrawal following the accident on the 28th of July 2023. And as you're aware, the MRH-90 didn't meet the Australian Defence Force's requirements, which is the basis on its withdrawal from service.
And those are, what would you call the downing? A failure? It wasn't a crash, really, was it, in Jervis Bay?
Sandra, that event you would normally hear referred to as a ditching because the aircraft ended up on the surface of the water.
And why did it take so long to get the investigation results and reports coming through? Well, I remember just being so frustrated.
Well said. It was a very complex investigation. In fact, the most complex for 20 years or so. It involved a complicated and complex recovery of the wreckage in Hull from the ocean, and we enlisted help from ATSB specialists to do that. Once that was done, there were three phases pretty much where the investigation was investigated from a technical aspect, then the data from the instruments was analysed, and then interviews were made with appropriate people. All those incidents took a significant amount of time because they were done comprehensively and in accordance with international standards.
Sorry, Sandra, just to assist you, can I just confirm that you're referring to the Jervis Bay incident?
Yes.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah. So, Sandra, I would say, just further to what my colleague said, all those factors still remain. Safety investigations, events like this, can be quite complex in nature, particularly noting the recovery of the aircraft from an overwater incident site. So making sure that the investigation has sufficient time to appropriately consider all factors and come up with the findings and recommendations is the way in which we make sure that we get to the point of learning the lessons from how that incident transpired.
Right, and the Taipan has had more than its share of problems.
Sorry, Sandra, was there a question?
Yeah, is that correct?
Sandra, I think there's a well-documented history through various estimates, hearings and others of different aspects that have been managed through the life of the MRH-90 Taipan.
So in your statement, Air Vice Marshal Innes, you said, "We value the important role that investigations and inquiries play in learning from tragedies such as this." What is that role? Major General Hafner just touched on learning, but why? I mean, I understand why. I just want to understand defence.
I'm not quite sure of the question, Senator.
You said we value the important role that investigations and inquiries play in learning from tragedies such as this. Why?
Well, so that we can preserve life and avoid similar incidents in the future.
Okay, exactly. So it's about the future. Isn't it also about defence capability?
Yes.
This is not a test. I'm not trying to mark you right or wrong, but this is pretty basic stuff, isn't it?
It is.
And does defence recognise the importance of culture and the systems in which people work?
Safety culture, in fact, is a part of the Defence Aviation Safety Program and culture, and it is promoted and developed and nurtured.
Can you define culture as you see it? And what drives the culture? What shapes the culture?
Well, culture involves a broad range of mainly personnel interaction and attitudes combined with policy, frameworks, education, training, and I guess development and learning over a period of time.
So it's fairly comprehensive, the definition.
Yes.
It's almost all-encompassing. There's very little in an organisation that would not be affected by the culture.
It's a broad topic, yes.
Right. Are you aware of W. Edwards Deming, the famous management consultant?
No, I'm not.
He was responsible for, he was an American, he was responsible for the turnaround in Japanese manufacturing. So that's a massive cultural change. The automakers started taking his advice. The next thing, they were selling Hondas and Toyotas in Detroit. And that was massive. And then it started improving the American automobile industry. He said initially that 85% of the problems in an organisation with people are not due to the people, but due to the systems. When he, later on, another 10 years later, he actually said it's probably more like 95%. So it's not so much people problems that people whinge about, it's the systems. So the systems drive behaviour, would you agree?
Yes.
And the behaviour then shapes the attitudes. Repeat the behaviour long enough and the attitude comes.
Well, I think that contributes, yes.
Yeah. The other, in addition to systems, I'm sure you know this, I just want to get it on the record. The other significant contributor to culture is leadership. What the leadership focuses on and how it focuses on it drives people's behaviour.
That's a statement, I agree.
Who's responsible for the culture?
Well, the leadership are responsible for driving the culture, but everyone is involved in nurturing and continuing with that culture.
So if the culture is not conducive to safety, who's responsible for recognising and changing the culture?
Well, the organisation wholly, but within that there will be leaders who are responsible for it. And, in Defence's case, a big player in that, a big part in that is the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, but also the senior leadership of Defence, and also those people who are part of Defence, operating and flying the aircraft, maintaining the aircraft, part of the safety culture.
Who's responsible for the systems under which people are working, or in which people are working?
Well, Defence is responsible, so there's regulation, then there's training and education. So the regulation side is the Defence Aviation Safety Authority. That is directed by high legislation through Defence, and then those who participate in it are also responsible for the regulation.
And again, is it the senior leadership that's most responsible?
They are
within the regulatory framework. Admittedly, you've got that burden as well.
Yes.
Because what the top brass focus on is what people see the top brass valuing, and they like to contribute.
They have a large part to play, Senator, yes.
Yeah. Do you take responsibility for the system's leadership culture?
Absolutely, I play an important part in that, yes.
How do you assess it against the Army's values, against the Army's regulations, and, sorry, the Defence Forces regulations, and how do you assess it?
It's assessed by a framework of regulations and levels of including audits, including reports, be they independent, be they audited on a time frame, but they are done over a schedule, a structured schedule, and at differing levels right throughout the organisation, including maintenance, operations, safety. It's quite a complex and structured means to do that, to assess it, and that's rolled up. And on top of that, it comes to a Defence Aviation Safety Board at Defence, which is held annually or biannually. I'd have to check on that.
I can remember working for a large American oil company in a joint venture in Australia. And safety apparently wasn't much of a concern. I'm talking about several decades ago. And it wasn't a concern for the oil companies, generally speaking, until they started blowing up oil refineries and threatening cities in America. Then it became very, very important. And the Americans translated that importance into a checklist, and they did audits. And I was sitting here in charge of an operational coal mine, largest coal mine in the country, underground coal mine in the country, and I remember thinking it was largely bullshit because it just became a checklist. I could have got around it and got top marks for it. The best way I found was for walking around, watching and listening and engaging with people. Is that part of your audit, personal audit?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I've been a commanding officer in all levels, and absolutely that's part of it, yes.
'Cause
Understanding your people and how they work and what they do is part of what you do as command.
Right, I could walk underground and someone would say in the control room, the Eagle has just landed. And people could change the system, could change what they're doing just to please me. But I could tell, because I'd started off as a coal-face mine, I could tell whether or not that was just for the last 5 minutes or that was inherent. How do you assess the culture on an ongoing basis and what people are really doing, not just filling out the audits?
Well, as I've said, Senator, they're comprehensive audits. They're not just a tick and flick audit. They involve training, they involve two-way conversations, they involve unit visits, they involve a very robust safety reporting system that involves feedback loops, which are mandated and also audited. So it's, I have confidence in the system.
Sandra, if I could perhaps assist, as the Commander of Army Aviation Command, when I look at the Army Aviation Organisation, as Air Vice Marshal Innes has reflected, there's a broad range of activities that we undertake, and safety is embedded in everything that we do, planning and execution. As has been reflected, it's from visits, it's through engagement at different levels of command, as well as providing opportunities for the workforce to express their views. It's through safety reporting. It's through different levels of oversight that's conducted. It's a continuous process that's constantly going to both assure what is occurring within the organisation, but also providing the opportunity for the bottom-up feedback to be provided as well.
A lot of it's done by antenna, isn't it? You can get a feel for a workplace. You can get a feel for the interactions of people. You can get a feel for whether it's top-down driven, whether it's bossy, whether it's inviting, whether it's got discipline. You can tell about the standard of discipline. How do you tell?
Well, Sander, like I said, it's through the range of different mechanisms. It really relies on all levels of command being invested. Like I say, there are some things which I can see through reporting mechanisms. There are other things which you get from personal visits and personal engagement. And as I said, providing those opportunities when you visit units, when you conduct safety tours to units, which I do, is the ways in which you convey safety information and trends that you are seeing. It's also the way in which you provide the opportunities to receive information from all layers and all levels of the organisation.
Thank you. We've heard from a number of people who've been in both the Army Aviation Wing and other branches as well, the Navy and the Air Force. And they say Navy and Air Force have got pretty high standards and they seem to be fairly similar. The Army is different. How is it different, the Army Aviation Wing, different from the Navy and the Air Force?
Sorry, Sandra, I don't know the context on how those comments were provided to you. What I would say is Army has a different operating environment in some regards. Mm-hmm. We clearly are focused around the land and the littoral environment based on the nature of the missions that we undertake. It is common for us to be forward deployed into austere environments. We operate as part of a combined arms team. We conduct large-scale operations because that's typically what's required of the mission. So there are differences between the nature of battlefield aviation operations to those more maritime-focused operations that you might see within the Fleet Air Arm. And it's obviously different to what we see within the Royal Australian Air Force based on their missions and their platforms that they operate.
Air Vice Marshal Innes, you've come from the Air Force?
Yes, Senator.
Do you notice any difference? Do you see or feel any difference in the Army Aviation Wing compared with counterparts in the RAF or the Navy, apart from the logistical and the structural?
Well, they fly closer to the ground, Senator, than us. But each service, and in fact each aircraft, has their own distinctive culture, would be very fair to say. Army is shaped by their particular mission, the aircraft they fly, and indeed their own culture. So there is a distinct difference between all three services and all aircraft. That's what makes the job of aviation safety one that's quite complex and yeah, I'll say complex to regulate.
That's very much appreciated. The fact is that despite the risks of leaving the ground in a commercial aircraft and a recreational aircraft, we have thousands of flights a day around the world, and so very, very few accidents. Is there a difference in culture between the Army Aviation Wing and the other two branches?
I've already answered that, Senator, and said yes, there is a difference in the culture, and that's driven by the nature of their operations and the Army culture. I'm not saying whether it's better or worse, I'm saying it's different.
No, I accept that I agree it's not better or worse necessarily, but do the standards in the Army, are they higher or lower?
I can't comment on that.
Can't?
Can't.
Senator, I would say that the Defence Aviation Safety regulations apply regardless of service. They are defence regulations, and within the defence aviation enterprise, we abide by the same requirements in terms of our safety and oversight systems.
And what about, sorry?
Well, I was just going to say there's not a comparison made between systems. More they are, as the Major General said, they are measured against the regulation on their own basis.
Coming to regulation outside of the Defence Forces, workplace health and safety regulations, if there's a change of operating parameters, then it requires a risk management. Is that correct? Depending on the scope.
Broadly, any significant change will require an analysis of whether those changes are safe, unsafe. If it's a change in operating procedure, yes, I think that's where you're going.
So it's not only defence regulations and laws that you have to comply with, it's also workplace health and safety regulations and laws.
Well, indeed, the DASA safety regulation is derived from the WHS.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Stewart.
We're not hearing any audio.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Doesn't look like you're muted. Would you like me to go to Senator Shoebridge first?
Is that better?
Oh, that works.
Yes,
that's perfect.
Excellent. Did they turn the volume up in the room? Is that why you went, oh?
Yeah.
Thank you. The first question is that I'm aware that there have been public allegations made regarding a possible cover-up of aspects of the incident. How does Defence respond to these allegations?
I'm not aware of any cover-up of any sort, Senator.
I'm not suggesting that there has been a cover-up on your part. I'm saying there have been some allegations of a cover-up. What do you say in response to those allegations?
Well, what I say, Senator, is that we have a full aviation investigation safety report which has been presented and is publicly available. There's also an annex to that has some information in there, whereas a plethora of information which goes into quite detailed explanation of the circumstances surrounding any incident, and in this case the Taipan incident, that is available for anyone to read.
Information is publicly and readily available for anybody who wants to take a proper look.
Yes.
Thank you. I think you spoke to this in your opening statement, but you talked about the recommendations that were made from the Aviation Safety Investigation Report, and that all 46 recommendations arising have been accepted. Can you outline the progress made in implementing those recommendations and the governance arrangements that are in place overseeing that work?
So each of those recommendations were allocated to a lead. Majority of those were to Army Aviation, but indeed some were to higher defence organisations and in fact to the Defence Aviation Safety Bureau. So I think that's a good reminder of the independence of the investigation, in that it did identify areas for improvement right across the broader defence organisation.
Sandra, if I can just assist, of the 46 recommendations, 25 of those were assigned to Army Aviation. I can report that of those 25, 19 have been complete and closed, and the difference between complete and closed is closure is after the actions have been completed by Aviation Command. We submit that to an independent assurance process where outside of Army subject matter experts will review the actions that we've undertaken to make sure it fully addresses the recommendation. So, like I say, 19 of the 25 assigned to Army are complete and closed. A further 4 are complete and are going through independent assurance, which therefore leaves 2 outstanding, and they are undergoing work. They are actions which relate to the training system, and in some cases they just take a little bit more time because there's multiple stages going right back to training needs analysis to then look at your training solutions.
And so what's your sense of timing for being able to complete those? Noting you just said it takes a little bit more time.
So, Sandy, again, for Army Aviation's actions, we will have all actions complete before the end of this year.
Excellent, thank you. And I think you've partially answered my next question in response to some of the questions from Senator Roberts, but feel free to expand on it if you don't think you've had an opportunity to cover some of the things that are here. But in your submission, you talk about generative aviation safety culture and continuous improvement. What lessons has Defence learned from this accident, and what changes have been made since July 2023?
So, Sandra, you can't have an event like this and not find areas where you can seek to improve the way in which you conduct the operations that we do. And so there's been a range of activities. One has, we established what's called the International Combat Aviation Safety Summit. So what that involves is with a number of our international partners that conduct similar operations, the United States Army, the United States Marine Corps, the New Zealand Air Force, our Canadian counterparts, our counterparts from the United Kingdom. We have come together on key safety topics that affect military rotary wing operations, such as spatial disorientation. And so we've implemented a range of further controls and training measures, and we have done that in partnership with our international colleagues. We have looked at our procedures around fatigue management. Again, while we have always had measures within our procedures for fatigue management and checking of fatigue. Again, looking for further opportunities on how we would enhance those measures, which we have done. We've also looked at a range of our flying techniques to see if there were further opportunities on how we could improve the flying procedures that we operate to minimise the risk of spatial disorientation as it's particularly relevant to this incident, and obviously looked at how we embed those procedures within our training for our aircrew.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're not just reading your own homework and implementing the changes, you're actually chatting to a whole bunch of other people too about gaining some of that best practice approaches to not just the internal stuff, but the external stuff too.
Yeah, that's correct, Sandra. Spatial disorientation is not a phenomenon obviously unique to Australian Army aviation. It's been a contributing factor in many accidents globally, but you see that particularly just based on the nature of military rotary wing operations. So we've absolutely sought to learn from our counterparts as they have learnt from us. And that's not only good for a generative safety culture, that one of continuous improvement, it's also really important from an interoperability perspective to make sure that we are all advancing in our flying techniques and procedures should we operate together in the future.
Thank you. This like your comments flow nicely into my next question, really, which is about the importance of realistic training in preparing people in Army aviation. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yes, Sandra. There's a element that's described within the submission that that Defence made to the committee, but the nature of battlefield aviation operations, so Army aviation operations, we fly in formation, and that's so that you can have the largest scale of force arrive at a location, which you can clearly understand that would have benefits in terms of achieving your mission outcomes. We fly usually at night and at low level, and that's because you are training for what would be a threat environment where one of the key threats is from enemy weapon systems, and the way that you mitigate that threat is by minimising your exposure. You will fly in conditions that degrade enemy sensors, and so as you can, you put all that together, formation at night at low level, there is a level of risk in those activities, but you train in a controlled environment to manage that risk so that you're actually treating what is an other risk, which is the risk from a threat. That is what we're training to be able to operate in a threat environment.
Thank you. Useful to have to step through that. My next question and final question, just for your reference too, Chair. You have talked about the multiple investigations and inquiries that have examined the incident. Could you outline Defence's role in supporting those processes and provide an update on any outstanding matters?
So, Sandra, there's obviously been a range of different levels of investigation and inquiry. The Defence Flight Safety Bureau Aviation Safety Investigation is one, as has been discussed in this committee. That safety investigation was completed last year, and that is the basis on which the 46 recommendations are being implemented. There has been the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force inquiry. There has been this Senate inquiry. There is the actions of Comcare, which we understand are still ongoing, and the Queensland coroner, obviously based on the location of the accident, has also the ability to inquire into this incident.
And so what's Defence's role in supporting those processes?
So, Sandra, we support all of those processes, and make sure that we remain as transparent in the actions that led to the tragic event, in our response subsequently, and making sure that the importance of all forms of investigation and inquiry are valued, so that again we can learn from this incident and take, where possible, actions to prevent reoccurrence.
Thank you. And sorry, Chair, I do just have one final question. I think it's easy to overlook the real human impact when we're talking about at a high level about recommendations and submissions and training and a whole bunch of other things. But it's one of the worst days when you lose some of your own people and the impact that has on families in particular. Can you outline the support provided to families and what is it that you do to help them through, as well as I suppose colleagues too internally?
Yeah, Sandra, for the families, really the efforts have been are led at all levels by the members of the unit, just based on the close connection that exists. We also have the Defence Member and Family Services with their bereavement teams that have been in support of the families and have continued to remain available. Through the course of, particularly whilst the Defence Flight Safety Bureau investigation was occurring, visiting with the families and providing updates on the progress of the investigation. On the first anniversary of the accident, there were commemorative services conducted where 40 family members were taken to our Army Aviation Memorial at Oakey in southeast Queensland, and then for an onward service up in the Whitsunday Islands, obviously with all the support surrounding the families. And for events, tragic events such as this, there is always an ongoing relationship between the unit and the families, and particularly around times such as Anzac Day and Remembrance Day, when we remember all of our fallen, is keeping that connection. And then at key commemoration milestones, 5 years, 10-year anniversaries is where we again come together on these days.
Thank you, and thank you for your work.
Thank you very much, Senator Stewart. Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks very much, Chair. Major General Hafner, did I hear you correctly? You said Army Aviation has a safety first culture?
That's correct, Sandra.
Have you seen the findings from the IGADF inquiry, have you?
No, I have not, Sandra.
Are you aware of your interactions with the IGADF about the obvious concerns that arose during that inquiry and have been raised in public in some of the evidence given before the IGADF inquiry? Are you aware of the concerns about the safety culture inside Army Aviation?
Sandra, I'm aware of testimony that's been given to the IGADF, but what I would say is, as per my earlier comments, safety is embedded in everything that we do, planning, in execution, in the operations. So it's just an inherent part of aviation operations.
At some time, mate, at some point in the future, the findings of the IGADF will come out and people will review the evidence you've given to this committee here in light of those findings. Do you think your evidence will age well?
Sandra, I've served in the Australian Army now for over 35 years. Most of that career has been within Army aviation. And like I said, I can't think of a time within my career where safety is not a consideration in all that we do.
You see, you sent incredibly fatigued pilots into that sortie, Bushman 83 and other pilots in that sortie were suffering significant fatigue, and they were sent in on an optional, not a mission crucial, but an optional exercise, notwithstanding significant concerns about their exhaustion and the amount of rest that they'd have. Do you have any concerns at all about how you manage fatigue in Army aviation?
Senator, I'd say that within Army aviation procedures, again, as I reflected earlier, we have always had and continue to have fatigue management measures which give procedures and requirements in terms of rest. It has requirements in terms of checking fatigue. We have taken opportunity to have a look at those procedures and seek opportunities to enhance. But again, fatigue management measures have been existing and continue to exist within our procedures.
Yep, they existed, but you sent incredibly fatigued individuals into a mission which ended up with multiple fatalities. Do you think that you've managed fatigue well?
Sandra, I've got nothing further to add than what I've already offered.
What changes have you made to fatigue management since this fatal accident?
Yeah. So, Sandra, we've had a look at mandatory use of fatigue risk assessment tools. So they are a tool that was available. It is a mandatory use by all aircrew every day. The results of people conducting that assessment are then considered as part of flight planning and flight authorisation. We have within our flight authorisation, so before a flight is authorised to proceed, there is a requirements in terms of checking fatigue as one of the steps by the flight authorising officer as part of independence. We also have a look at what are the duty periods available, and as I said, there was already mandated rest periods for personnel. We also constantly look at what is our schedule of activities to make sure that personnel are receiving the appropriate opportunities for leave, so that you're really looking through a lens of cumulative fatigue and making sure that personnel are afforded activities through the annual schedule of events to take leave as part of fatigue management as well.
You see, you had an optional fatigue assessment regime in place before this accident, and given the group of people who serve in Army aviation, they're very spirited. They don't want to let their team down. They wish to complete the missions they've been assigned. Optional fatigue management was plainly dangerous, wasn't it? Because people weren't doing it because it was optional. It was dangerous, wasn't it?
Sandra, that's not an accurate statement. The fatigue management requirements were not optional. They've been a mandated part of our procedures.
You just told me they were optional. You literally just gave evidence barely a minute ago where you said they were optional and you made them mandatory. You can't do that. You can't say one thing a minute ago and then completely change. Well, you can, but it doesn't do you credit when you do that.
Sandra, what I referred to earlier was a fatigue risk assessment tool So it's a measure, a mechanism which aids in the overall fatigue management approach. But as I've indicated, the fatigue management restrictions, rest periods, duty periods was all existing and mandatory preceding this accident.
You had an optional fatigue assessment tool which wasn't used because it was optional. You've now been forced to make it mandatory. The reason was because having it optional was dangerous, wasn't it? Because people weren't doing it.
That's incorrect, Sandra.
How am I wrong?
Sandra, the tool was not forced on the Army Aviation to make it mandatory. We've looked for opportunities on how do we inform risk and fatigue management decisions, and applying this tool along with a range of other factors when you assess the fatigue of individuals. Like I say, fatigue is checked by individuals themselves, fatigue is checked by their crew members, fatigue is independently checked as part of the flight authorisation process as well. So there are many levels on the checking of fatigue, and that's in addition to what are mandated rest and maximum duty periods that are in our procedures and were in our procedures preceding this accident.
In flying a helicopter, spatial disorientation can be lethal, can't it?
Sandra, spatial disorientation is, in a global sense, you can find as a factor in many accidents.
It can be lethal. And in fact, when you look at accidents, spatial disorientation in helicopters is perhaps the leading cause for lethal accidents in helicopters. Do you agree?
Sandra, spatial disorientation is a factor in many accidents.
Yeah, it can be lethal. This is my proposition to you. It can be lethal. And for that reason, it's incredibly dangerous. Do you disagree with that?
No, Sandra.
And you should do everything you possibly can to ensure that your pilots in aircraft in Army aviation do not experience spatial disorientation because it can be lethal. Do you agree with that?
Sandra, we train our pilots on spatial disorientation. We seek to train them in procedures should they become disoriented, how to recover, and as I explained earlier, have worked with a number of our international counterparts to look at ways that we can further train and enhance the ways in which you avoid becoming spatially disoriented.
You should be doing everything in your power to ensure that pilots in Army aviation are not subject to an experience that can lead to spatial disorientation. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Sandra, and that's exactly what we are doing.
Your own documentation said that the top hour system that was being used at the time of the accidents can lead to spatial disorientation, didn't it? Your own document said it.
Sandra, there are a number of aspects within the test reports related to the helmet-mounted sighting device.
No, the flight manual. The flight manual had a big warning sign on it. And one of the big reasons the big warning sign on it was because the top owl can lead to spatial disorientation. That's what the big warning sign was about, wasn't it?
Sandra, the use of the helmet-mounted sighting device, if you don't use it correctly in accordance with the procedures within the manuals and the training delivered to our aircrew, could contribute to spatial disorientation.
Your flight manual had a large warning sign, somewhere in the 900 pages of the flight manual, a large warning sign, and it said use of the top owl can lead to spatial disorientation. And it said it on multiple points, didn't it? and you let that system remain in use. That's the truth, isn't it?
Sandra, like I said, the helmet-mounted sighting device and the warnings and cautions and notes that are in the flight manual are related to how you correctly use the system, and if you don't use the system, there is a risk of spatial disorientation. But the helmet-mounted sighting device software and the display it gives you is also reported as improving situational awareness of aircrew in the test reports.
Sorry, can I interject?
You agreed with me earlier that you should do everything possible to prevent pilots in Army aviation being subject to conditions that lead to spatial disorientation. Do you remember agreeing with that earlier?
That's correct, Sandra.
And yet your own operating manual, buried away in the 900 pages, had a bold warning, and then not once, but on at least 3 separate occasions, direct warnings that the use of the top hour can lead to spatial disorientation. How did you let that happen?
Sandra, as I've already reflected, your characterisation of what's written in the flight manual is not necessarily reflecting. If I was to use commentary, I'll do a direct reading of a warning if that would be of assistance.
Can I just interrupt just for 1 second? And sorry, Senator Shoebridge, with your indulgence. You're saying the correct use. You keep saying the correct use of the top hour system. Does correct use mean that the pilots that were using the system were expected to only ever look straight ahead? Because the second that they turned their heads, is that counted in your manual and how Defence have approved this as not being correct use of the system?
Sandra, the information that's provided by the helmet-mounted sighting device, as I said, actually aids situational awareness.
No,
It contains,
I understand all of that.
It contains,
but what we've heard in evidence, and we've heard this from a number of different people, that the evidence is that it's fine as long as you're looking straight ahead. The second that you turn, you get this incorrect 180-degree inversion, an error. And I think it's fair to say it's an error. But you keep saying, and you've used it a number of times now in response to Senator Shoebridge, you're saying the correct use of it. And I'm saying to you, does that mean that means the pilots were never expected to turn their heads ever, and that's correct use?
No, that's not correct, Sandra. So when you are setting the pitch attitude of the aircraft,
yep,
which is, and we discussed this at the last hearing, the pitch attitude information is what can be ambiguous at the viewing to the obliques, and the use of the term ambiguous is the term that is in the test report from the Army Aviation Test and Evaluation section. So in flight, you will always scan when you are flying. In formation flight, you are more biased in your orientation of observing to the front, because that's where the aircraft are that you are formating off. You look through the symbology that's being presented so that you're looking for the visual image.
Yep.
You also adjust your focal point to look at the varying information, which you can adjust. But when you're setting pitch attitude information, the aircrew are taught to correctly orient to the front. So looking forward.
I can understand all of that, but when you have an instance where conditions are such that there is no clear visible horizon and you lose sight of the aircraft in front of you that you're holding formation with, and it seems that's the evidence of what happened, that it seems you are going to have to use other manoeuvres to try and regain sight of that other aircraft, which means you're not going to be orientating just straight ahead. So you're going to have to... So I don't understand, then there's an error in the top hour, and I guess I would put to you, do you accept that there is an error in the top hour system, that it is flawed?
Sandra, as we've reflected, There is a characteristic of the top bow system that's been described in the test reports. There is conditions on how you use the system.
I'm not in terms of how you use it. I mean, this is starting to get very much into. It is a very direct question. Do you agree that there is a flaw in the top hour system that is going to invert what pilots are seeing by 180 degrees, which could cause them to become disorientated?
Sandra, it's quite sure from the last testimony, when you look to the beam, the pitch information can become ambiguous in the display.
Yep.
The extent, it varies under the orientation of the aircraft and a range of other factors that come into play.
Yeah,
Can I just...
yes, please do. Sorry, Senator Shivers, this is yours.
Sorry, no, that's okay. I'm more than happy for you to come and tidy up after me. And I appreciate it. I do. I genuinely appreciate it. Major General, why don't we just refer to what's in the actual manual? Do you agree that the flight manual contains the following warning concerning the HMSD software version 5.0 pitch attitude, where it has in bold, highlighted, plain box, the words warning, setting aircraft attitude using the HMSD should be done only when line of sight is aligned with X-axis to prevent disorientation. Do you agree that that bold warning is contained in the flight manual?
That's correct, Senator.
Mm-hmm. Do you then agree that it says in section 2 on airmanship, when the flying pilot's line of sight is not aligned straight ahead, bracket aligned with HC forward axis, bracket, setting an aircraft attitude using HMSD V5.10 symbology will lead to spatial disorientation? Do you agree it says that?
Senator, that information is contained within the standardisation manual for the aircraft.
Will lead to spatial disorientation. That's what it says in black and white, isn't it?
Senator, but the full context, as you just read, speaks to if you don't align the sight with the aircraft axis when you're setting the pitch attitude.
Yeah, if you're looking anywhere other than straight ahead, it will lead to spatial disorientation. That's what it says, isn't it?
That's not what it says, Senator. What it says is if you are setting pitch attitude, then you need to be looking to the front.
Yes. What it says is if you're setting the attitude on the heads-up display, which is partly designed to set the attitude when you're looking ahead, you can set it looking ahead using the instrumentation on the top out. Do you agree with that?
Senator, normally you will use the primary aircraft instruments which are on the display panel.
But you've got the HMSD up in front of you and you can set it looking straight ahead on the HMSD. That's what this says, correct?
Senator, you read the words on what's in the standardisation manual already.
And that's what it says. I don't know why you're being resistant to this. It's most peculiar. You're being resistant to confirming what's in black and white in the manual. I don't understand why. You can set it looking straight ahead using the heads up on the top sail, can't you?
Senator, you can use the HMSD symbology when you're looking ahead for the purposes of looking at pitch information along with your primary flight instruments in the aircraft.
But if you're looking left or right and you do exactly the same thing with the HMSD, it will lead to spatial disorientation. The exact same thing if you're doing it looking left or right. That's what your own document says. That will lead to spatial disorientation, doesn't it?
And Senator, that's why the aircrew are briefed on the procedures for using the helmet mounted sighting device. They undertook training packages and a range of instruction in simulation and airborne to make sure that they understood the correct use of the system, particularly if you are going to set pitch information is looking to the front. If I could draw a parallel, it's like when you accelerate in your car when you're driving down the road. Typically you will be looking to the front and glancing down at your speedometer versus looking out your side window when you are seeking to do a speed change in your car.
Yeah, but you see, if a motor vehicle gave you a response in your side mirror that was going to lead to spatial disorientation and lead to you crashing your vehicle, that wouldn't be considered road safety and wouldn't be allowed on the roads. But you see, Army Aviation let that exact error operate on an even more dangerous piece of equipment, a Taipan helicopter, didn't you? If this was on a car, it wouldn't have been allowed within cooey of a road, but you let it go on a far more dangerous piece of equipment, in this case an Army Aviation helicopter. You don't have any regrets for this?
Sandra, the helmet-mounted sighting device, as I've said, is recognised in test reports as improving the situational awareness of the crew. There is training on how to correctly use the system so that you can safely operate the aircraft. And again, I'll just call back to the safety investigation report from the Defence Flight Safety Bureau, which identified that it was very unlikely that the helmet-mounted sighting device pitch attitude information was contributory to the spatial disorientation.
Well, it's a very convenient outcome for Army Aviation, having allowed this incredibly dangerous thing to be on the aircraft, isn't it? What the Defence Aviation Safety Board said, it's an incredibly convenient result for Army Aviation, saying that this thing that has multiple lethal warnings on it wasn't in any way causative. It's convenient for you, isn't it?
Sandra, the safety investigation made that determination.
You said it wasn't one warning, was it, in the manual? Have you counted how many times the warning about spatial disorientation using the top hour was set out in the manual? Do you know how many times it was put in there?
Sandra, when you have a look within the standardisation manual for the aircraft, what you'll find is the information regarding the correct use of the system, and when you set the pitch information is across different flight regimes. So in general, it's within the airmanship section of the manual. You then see it within terrain flight, within instrument flight, and within night flight, so that you make sure that if someone is operating the system and they were just looking at a particular section of the standardisation manual, then they are presented with the information, no matter which of those flight regimes that they're going to operate within.
On 6 separate occasions, the flight manual says, one way or another, that the top hour can lead to spatial disorientation, an outcome that you agreed earlier can be lethal. Do you agree? On 6 separate occasions, it says that.
Sandra, just to be clear, we're distinguishing these 2 different manuals that the information is presented within. There's an initial warning within the aircraft flight manual, and then there is a series of warnings, cautions and notes in each of the chapters of the aircraft standardisation manual. But as I said, that's reflected within the airmanship chapter, the terrain flight chapter, the instrument flight chapter and the night flight chapter. Yes, it's contained within those documents.
You see, systems that were actually focused on safety first wouldn't say to pilots of an inherently dangerous piece of equipment like a helicopter, actually be careful, because if you look out your side, this could actually produce lethal consequences. A safety first system would ensure that kind of faulty equipment was never in operation in the first place. That's what safety first would mean. Don't put all the risk down on the pilots who are fatigued. Don't put all the risk on the individuals further down in the chain of command, but you'd accept the risk at a higher level and you would remove the risk. And you consciously didn't remove the risk, did you? You just put all of the risk down on the pilots.
Sandra, as I've indicated before, software version 5.10 was an enhancement over the previous version of the HMSD software, and it gave improved situational awareness for the aircrew utilising
of the
that system.
HMSD software requires 6 separate warnings that it could lead to lethal spatial disorientation. Did it contain 6 separate warnings about that?
I couldn't answer that question, Sandra.
Well, it didn't, because this risk appeared in this version. And again, I say this. You whack all these warnings in a 900-page document because senior officers inside Army Aviation knew there was this lethal risk associated with this equipment, and you decided to transfer that risk onto fatigued pilots. That's what you chose to do. You transferred the risk onto fatigued pilots, and you moved it off your well-braided shoulders and you sent it down onto fatigued pilots. That's what happened here, and that's not safety first, is it?
Sandra, I don't agree with your characterisation. Like I said, software version 5.10 represented an enhancement. It had a number of features which improved the situational awareness for the aircrew. It was introduced in the service through a process. The training was given to the aircrew, and I think you'll find through the testimony that was given during the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force inquiry, aircrew were aware on how to correctly use the system. And I gave in my last evidence before this committee that again, with the 3 years that this software version was in use, that there weren't reported safety instances regarding the use of this software version.
I might just move on to a different matter because I feel we're just ploughing the same ground here. What actually happened to the Taipan airframes? There were reports that they were cut up and buried in the desert. What actually did happen to them?
Sandra, I think that question is best taken on notice. We can get what is now the Defence Delivery Group to talk. They're responsible for disposal actions, and we can come back to you on the exact nature.
You must know what happened to the Taipans. Did they just disappear into a defence black hole? Tell me what happened to the airframes, as you understand it.
Yeah. So, Sandra, in general terms, parts that were sought by other international users of the aircraft were returned back into the system to support other operators. Like I say, those elements of the aircraft that could not be otherwise used were given for recycling purposes.
I've seen images. There are images that have been shared of all of the airframes all stripped down inside a warehouse. What happened to those airframes?
As I said, Sandra, once all the parts that could be contributed back into the system were removed, then those elements that served no further use were disposed of through recycling.
What, you put them in the yellow bin? What do you mean disposed of through recycling?
Sandra, as I indicated before, I don't know the exact details of the recycling process. We could take that question on notice.
I mean, you say recycling. Were they cut up and disposed of in a pit or similar? Or are you saying they were fed into some sort of municipal recycling system?
Sandra, as I've indicated...
You said recycling. I'm asking you what you mean by recycling.
And as I've said, Sandra, I'd need to take that question on notice.
No, but what do you understand recycling to mean?
But Sandra...
Sitting there now, you've used the word. What do you understand it to mean? Were they chopped up and put in the council's yellow bin?
Sandra, I wouldn't like to speculate. Like I said, it's not my...
Well, what did you mean? I don't want you to speculate. I just want you to tell me what you meant.
Sandra, the disposal strategy is for those items that could not be returned of value into the system, that the residual of the aircraft would be recycled. The exact details... The exact details of that recycling, as I've indicated, we can take that question on notice and come back.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Shoebridge. And can I just ask, with that to be taken on notice, the value that was gathered back for the Defence Department? So if there was on-selling to various other nations, or there was, if it was recycled and, did the department receive money for the scrap metal, that would be really helpful as well. Sorry, Senator Shoebridge.
What they got in the return and earn thing, Ipswich.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions before I will go back to Senator Roberts, who has some final questions as well. And I just wanted to look into, just briefly, you talked a little bit about your fatigue risk assessment tools that are now mandatory. Would the crew that were flying, would they have passed that mandatory test on fatigue?
Sandra, I'd need to take that question on notice.
If you could, that would be very helpful, I think, because there has been evidence that has been given that said that the captain who was flying had mentioned fatigue and had mentioned to superior officers the risks. So that would be very, very helpful if you could provide that on notice. In terms of when it was made mandatory, so you sort of mentioned coming through for flight planning and authorisation. When did that become mandatory to have fatigue considered as a component of that?
So, Sandra, as I indicated, fatigue management has always been within our regulations. In terms of the flight authorisation checklist or within our standing instructions, we have an aide memoir for a flight authorising officer to go through a range of considerations before authorising a flight.
Yep.
There is a section within that looks at human factors. One of those elements is fatigue, and that was in existence prior to the accident.
Can you also then, and you may not know the answer to that, so again, did this flight meet that requirement for fatigue? And if so, what weighting did fatigue have on that checklist? Has that changed since this incident? Would be very, very helpful if you could provide that on notice to the committee. In terms of the impact and when we talk about the different sort of factors involved before allowing this flight to happen, so fatigue is one of the aspects. It was obviously part of an exercise that involves multi-nations. And I guess, how do you manage the risk when you've got not ideal flying conditions, as noted even in Defence's own documentation? So you have not ideal flying conditions, fatigue is a factor, and that's something that's come up in evidence as well. What factor did this being part of an international exercise play in the decision to allow the flight to go ahead?
Senator, I think when you're looking at flight authorisation, the criteria are the same, whether it's a local training mission that could be getting done or whether it's part of a large-scale exercise. The requirements and the checks that you go through as part of planning and then flight authorisation are the same regardless of those circumstances. Clearly, when these exercises are occurring, the group that was conducting the exercise was forward deployed in the airfield environment around the Whitsundays. They were in what is more akin to what we have experienced on operations in the past. So you're living, could be in tents or under other temporary accommodation measures. You're in proximity of your aircraft. Again, that's all very representative on our operational experience. So, the way in which you are considering those factors, while the checklist is the same, you're looking at the contextualisation as you're going through and looking at the flight authorisation and risk management process.
Can I then ask, and you sort of mentioned of the 46 recommendations, the 25, I think it was, that you said that had been assigned to you, 19 are complete and closed. Can I ask then, based on that, you've had new recommendations that have been handed to you, you've implemented them. Based on that and all of the different criteria that existed on that evening, would this flight still have been authorised?
Sandra, I wouldn't like to speculate because I wasn't there with all the information that was provided to the flight authorising officer.
If you could overlay that in what your new procedures are, what you've implemented as part of this investigation, perhaps you could provide that on notice, because it's not needing to speculate, because I'm assuming it's like anything, everything there is exactly the same. It's a checklist. With these new recommendations in place, would that flight authorisation still have been given?
We can take that on notice, Sandra.
Thank you very much. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few more questions. I'm advised, General Hafner, that you said on June 19th, the previous hearing, that the operation evaluation involved Navy. I'm told that it did not. The IGADF inquiry apparently heard that no Navy personnel took part in the operational evaluation. Did you get that wrong?
Sandra, the individuals that were involved in the operational evaluation did include a Navy pilot. That individual was the test pilot who supported or conducted the Navy's flight testing of the system. That individual provided familiarisation on the software version to a number of the other aircrew that were participating in the operational evaluation based on their experience having used the system already.
Thank you. Excuse my throat. Secondly, you suggested that the operation evaluation covered each unit's operating environment. Apparently, I'm advised it didn't. The test environment was effectively benign compared to the conditions experienced in July 2023. Did you get that wrong?
No, I didn't, Sandra. The operational evaluation report covers a variety of measures. Those measures were through the different types of operations of different units. So that was inclusive of Navy's requirements, the requirements of our 5th Aviation Regiment that does more conventional air mobile operations, and our 6th Aviation Regiment for special operations activities. And the testing spanned a range of environments from day and night in the conduct of the evaluation.
But did any of them include conditions experienced in July 2023, akin to the conditions experienced?
Sandra, I think every time you fly, there will be slight variance within the conditions. I'm trying to correlate it exactly to the conditions on that night. I can't say whether that was the exact conditions on any of the individual test sorties.
Well, maybe you could take it on notice. The test environment for the operation evaluation was apparently effectively benign compared to the conditions experienced in July 2023.
As I said, Sandra, the operational evaluation report indicates that testing was done from day into night under a variety of conditions.
Akin to those in July 2023?
Like I said, Sandra, I'd need to take that on notice.
Thank you.
To do a comparison.
Thank you. In Afghanistan, Chinook helicopters were deployed by the Australian Defence Force, correct?
That's correct, Sandra.
Were Black Hawks from Australian Defence Forces deployed?
To Afghanistan? No, Sandra.
Were Taipans deployed?
No, Sandra.
Why not?
Sandra, I think that's probably a question for government.
Why government? Is it politics involved?
Sandra, the deployment of forces overseas, Defence obviously comes up with recommendations But those decisions in terms of what forces are deployed would be a decision that's made by government.
Apparently our Australian Army, SAS Regiment, valued the American Black Hawks and had close relationships with the American pilots. They were crying out for our own helicopters. Why were they not given helicopters by the Australians?
Sandra, I think, again, they're questions outside of what I can answer for you today.
Okay. Could you step us through the key agencies, departments and people involved in the chain of accountability that's dogged this Taipan helicopter from procurement, testing, deployment, testing of updates, including software, and training? Could you just rattle them off?
Sam, as you'd appreciate, the MRH-90 Taipan, that being designated for the Australian variant, is part of a broader global fleet of what was the NH-90 helicopter. And again, there's a number of variants of the aircraft depending on different roles that the aircraft performed. The aircraft from different industry and original equipment manufacturers. There is a span there. There is obviously quite a number of operating nations as well. So it's a very large list of potentially different organisations or nations that have had an aspect of involvement with the MRH. So if there was a more focused particular section that you're after, that may help us focus any response.
Sure, thank you. Could you talk about a list, just rattle off the Australian Defence Force, agencies, departments, people in the chain of accountability that's been associated with the Taipans in procurement, testing, deployment, testing of updates, including software and training?
Sandra, again, it's, you've got everything that stems from original government decisions regarding the acquisition of an aircraft, then through to the introduction of the aircraft, again, a range of relationships with different original equipment manufacturers and industry partners that would support. You then have, within the Department of Defence, you've got the operating organisation. So the MRH-90 was operated by the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Navy in their fleet air arm. You have the regulatory organisations, so the Defence Aviation Safety Authority. You have test organisations within the Army and the Navy. So there's quite a broad range of organisations, both within Defence and outside of Defence, that are involved in the introduction and the operation of the aircraft.
Well, thank you for giving me a truthful answer, because I agree with you. And that's my point, and that's the question I'd like to ask you both. With such a scattered accountability chain, and this helicopter that's not been satisfactory in Australian service, how the hell can you hold people accountable? How the hell can you develop trust? How the hell can you fix the problem, particularly when the IGADF report comes out? How can you do it when you've got such a scattered accountability, not a chain, it's a maze, it's a jumble? Accountability is the key, and that's what seems to be missing, especially in the Army Aviation Wing. How will you improve accountability in the Defence Forces, especially the Army Aviation?
Senator, I would say there is a large range of stakeholders that contribute to the functioning and sustainment of what is a complex aircraft system, as most aviation platforms are. In terms of authorities and accountabilities, one of the roles that I perform is I'm the Army Military Air Operator Accountable Major. That is a specific appointment within the Defence Aviation Safety Framework. So I have accountabilities, and then in executing those, there are a number of organisations that have responsibilities to me. But I'm quite clear that I am the military air operator, accountable major for Army, with the systems that Army Aviation operates.
That's wonderful to hear from you, but how will you make sure the accountability goes all the way through? Because it only needs one person to groupthink and it's shot. It's clear here, accountability in the Defence Forces is not strong. There are so many acronyms, so many agencies, so many departments. There are incidents after incidents. Your soldiers haven't got good morale right now. How will you fix it?
Sandra, again, I think that's a very generalised, broad comment that you've made. In terms of Army Aviation, I wear two hats. I'm the commander of Army Aviation Command, but I am also appointed by the Chief of Army under the Defence Aviation Safety Framework as the Army Military Air Operator, accountable major for those systems which Army operates.
Defence's focus, I'll read from Air Vice Marshal Innes's statement. The second last paragraph. Defence's focus remains on caring for our people. Good. Learning from this tragedy. Good. And ensuring that the lessons identified are translated into enduring improvements in aviation safety. What we're about is caring about not only the people in the Defence Force today, but the people in the Defence Force tomorrow. Preventing accidents. And caring about the future of 28 million people who rely upon your laudable service. That's fundamental. And I see lots of holes in the accountability in the defence. And this, what would you do if the IGADF recommends improved accountability? How are you going to fix it?
Look, I'm happy to have a go at answering that, Senator. And look, I think I might start with your general question there when you said, what are we going to do? Well, I think this report is a great start. I think it's very important that we follow through and support the recommendations and ensure that they're implemented.
Which
properly.
report?
Of this Taipan investigation, just for an example of how it goes. But
this one or the Defence Safety Bureau?
The Defence Safety Bureau.
That's already been criticised, but keep going.
Well, I guess that's my point. It's a comprehensive report. There are a lot of recommendations in there that I think are underway and going, and that's part of an ongoing process and a similar thing that's been going since 2000, where there has been a demonstrated improvement in safety across defence systems. So I think we need to support that. We need to believe in the process and support it going forward.
You've got a graph in your submission, figure 1, defence aviation accidents. It's true it's improved, but you had some pretty horrific stories in the past. Then you've had maybe false confidence for about 12 years. And I don't know the threats you were under at that time, but we've now lost 4 good men. And the accountability, the lack of accountability keeps coming up in defence interactions. How would you fix it? What specifics?
Well, as I say, the recommendations are broad-ranging and identify areas of improvement right across the defence organisation at the highest level. So I think those need to be accepted, acknowledged, and continue to work with through. It's a very complex and broad, as you acknowledged, system. To give a one-sentence answer to that is very, very difficult, Senator.
A couple of specifics.
Sandra, if I could just assist. Neither Air Vice Marshal Innes or I have been privy to the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Forces report, but that report will go through a process the same as the Defence Flight Safety, Aviation Safety
Can
Investigation
you give me some
report where...
specific changes that you're making to improve accountability in the in your own Defence Safety Bureau report?
Sandra, like I said, all of these recommendations from any of the reports once they're received are considered. There is deliberate evidence-based consideration of actions to be taken, and very much with a lens to making sure that those actions are enduring in how they treat risk. And you referred to the graph that was in the defence submission. Again, that's representative of learning from historical accidents. When I look at our aviation procedures, our procedures in themselves are one of our risk management treatments, because they incorporate the lessons of previous incidents, and they're the basis on how we've captured and maintained the lessons from anything that we learn and embed it within the way in which we operate going forward.
Can you give the troops who might be watching, the sailors who might be watching, the airmen who might be watching, airwomen who might be watching, some specifics that you are going to improve to make accountability better? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Roberts, and thank you again for appearing today. I think the committee has appreciated you coming along. It is a very difficult inquiry that we are doing here, and I think it's important we all remember that there are families, and there were 4 young men at the heart of this, and that's what we're trying to make sure that we don't have other families that are going to go through what the families of these 4 men who have tragically lost their lives. I would ask that any questions that you took on notice are returned to the committee by the 18th of August. I think the committee has been very good with Defence in allowing flexibility in answering those questions, but as we are coming now to finalising this inquiry, I would ask that they are done promptly so that we can consider them. As I said, there were things that came back that the committee didn't really get the time that it should have to consider the responses to those questions on notice, which is regrettable, but thank you for appearing today, and we look forward to receiving those other questions. With that, you are released, and that does conclude today's proceedings. The committee has agreed that answers to questions taken on notice to this hearing should be returned by close of business on Tuesday, the 18th of August. I thank all witnesses for giving evidence to the committee today. I also thank Broadcasting, Hansard and the Secretariat, and with that, I declare this hearing adjourned. Thank you.